Welcome to the Pipeline Online Podcast. In this episode, we have Aleana Young. She's the Shadow Minister for Jobs and Economy and Sask Power Critic for the Saskatchewan NDP. With the Saskatchewan government in June announcing that they plan on keeping coal going for years to come, the biggest question is, if the NDP get elected, will they keep it going or will they shut it down? We're going to talk about that, nuclear, and the NDP's plan to go from rock to reactor. Good afternoon, folks. Brian Zinchuk and Brahman Air here with the Pipeline Online Podcast. And today we have as our guest Aleana Young, who is the Shadow Minister for Sask Power, Jobs and Economy. And hello, you want to introduce yourself, Aleana?
Hey, yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian Bronwyn. Excited to be here, coming to you live from the slightly overcast, but nonetheless beautiful Saskatchewan Legislative Building.
So before we start here, Aleana, we always ask our guests to introduce themselves briefly.
Sure. So I'm Aleana Young, MLA for Regina South Albert. I'm in my second term of office here. Before that, I was a small business owner, still am, although don't spend any time there. I think I showed up to pick up a dead pigeon that had been eviscerated by some sort of larger bird for about 10 minutes this week, and that's about all I get to do there. And then before that, worked different levels of government, worked at PTRC, Petroleum Technology Research Project, down in Estevan on the Aquastore project, and spent a lot of time in grad school back in the day.
So I do want to mention that because this can be very pertinent to the discussion. Aleana I first met her 14 years ago when she was doing communications for Aquastore, which you look behind here, that's the CO2 project on the left at Boundary Dam, and Aquastore is the geological sequestration portion of that project. So we're talking coal and CO2. You probably have more experience than anyone else in this. We're going to start here, Bronwyn. You want to ask the first question?
Well, thanks, Brian. Welcome, Aleana. I guess just you've weighed in on the extension of the life of coal, which was announced recently by the government. And I know, Brian, you've done extensive work on this, and an article went out today, as I understand it, featuring you, Aleana, your positions on this. I know you went to Ontario and studied and surveyed the nuclear landscape, as it were, there. I guess your statement, you've made it before that the NDP would adapt an all of the above approach to power. I know you mentioned that to Brian in his piece, which went out this morning as well. So wind, solar, natural gas, hydro, with a bridge to nuclear. And I guess just my question would be, how is that not happening right now?
Sorry, Bronwyn, I apologize. I hate to get the podcast off on a bad start. Is your question, how is that different from what the government of Saskatchewan has announced?
Well, just the all of the above statement, which you've made before, that, we have to have obviously natural gas and wind and solar and hydro, and with that bridge to nuclear. So my question would be just how your position or take on it is different than really what is happening right now in terms of all of the above.
Yeah. So awesome question. Now that I understand it, I have my head wrapped around it. I think the biggest failure that I'd point to on the part of the status quo, on the part of the government of Saskatchewan, who, again, has been in power for 18 years, is the lack of investment that we've actually made in power generation and in our energy future and our energy security here in Saskatchewan. The Sask Party's been in power for 18 years. If they wanted to do something, they could have. They've had nearly 20 years of opportunity. But what we've seen is a real lack of investment in traditional sources. I've talked a lot about the need for more natural gas being built out, and a real lack of investment in renewables too, right? And we can get into that, but it's a huge economic opportunity that the government of Saskatchewan allowed to pass them by. Are wind and solar going to work all day, every day? No, of course not. It's a fact of physics, but we could and should have invested more yesterday in all of our generating assets, especially renewables, where we've seen that opportunity pass us by. And as we move into the fall, I know we're going to get into this in the interview. We're going to have a real plan for our power generation future, what the Saskatchewan NDP is proposing to people of Saskatchewan. And folks can dig into it. We're not going to drop it on the eve of an election. They'll have years to look at it, review it, give us their feedback, and they'll know exactly where we stand on that.
So I wanted to, I guess I failed to properly set the stage here at the beginning. So just so everyone understands where we're coming from, because all three of us definitely know the inside baseball on this. The federal government under Harper brought in regulations that said that by 2030, or by the time a coal generating unit hits 50 years old, it has to shut down. Now, what that meant is that, and those rules were tightened up a little bit under the Liberals, but they're essentially brought in by the Conservatives. And what that means is that the power stations, which I'll show us behind us here, that's Boundary Dam, that's Poplar River, and Shand, these power stations, unless they have carbon capture, which Boundary Dam has on one of 4 remaining units, must shut down by 2030. Now, the thing is that on a cold winter day, up to 44% of our power generation comes from coal. We're looking at, I'm not sure what the number is when they took Boundary Dam 4 off. We're looking at between 1,400 and 1,600 megawatts of coal power. And that is the equivalent of not 4, but 5 small modular reactors of 300 megawatts each. So the Saskatchewan government has moved towards building small modular reactors. They've said at least 2, and the previous minister has said up to possibly as many as 7 or 8. I mean, he changed that number every time he talked. And Premier Moe has since talked about building 1,000 megawatt reactors. It's that scale. They'd actually be 1,200 megawatts. For context, everyone should know that on a typical spring or fall day, we use 3,000 megawatts. A low demand day is 2,600 megawatts. The highest we've ever done is 3,900 megawatts. So that sets the stage. What happened here is that, and the clean electricity regulations, which the federal government has brought in, say that you must put carbon capture, and carbon capture of much higher standard than BD3 has ever produced. Otherwise, you have to shut down any of your natural gas or coal by 2035. That was the original thing. They've now changed it a little bit, but fundamentally, they want to get rid of fossil fuel power generation. So what happened here is that in January, Minister for Crown Investments Corp and Sask Power, I'll just say Sask Power, make it shorter, Jeremy Harrison, came to Cornack and Estevan and said, we are looking very seriously at rejuvenating our coal fleet. And he promised the workers he'll have an answer by July 1st. And people are like, well, maybe we've kind of heard this before. Let's see what's going to happen. And then on June 18th, they sent a letter directly to Sask Power employees saying, yes, we are going to rebuild the entire coal fleet, starting with certifying and putting back into operation Boundary Dam 4, which is this one here. So that's 5. Boundary Dam 4. And then doing the rest of the fleet, extending to Poplar River and extending to Shand eventually. And all this is as a bridge to nuclear, meaning that eventually we are going to build nuclear power plants. So that sets the stage here. And the question I wanted to ask, this is my fundamental question for the whole thing. Aleana, if the NDP forms government, what are they going to do when it comes to coal? Are they going to keep coal going for a short length of time, a long length of time? Are they going to shut it down on 2030 as federal regulations say? What would you do if you formed government in 3.5 years?
Thanks, Brian. What I'd say to you and what I'd say to your listeners is what I said in the article that you ran this morning. We are not going to be rebuilding 50-year coal assets to run them for 10, maybe 15 years. That's what the government of Saskatchewan is proposing to do. That's what Minister Harrison has said in black and white, out loud into microphones. he's not proposing, the government of Saskatchewan, the Sask Party, they're also not going to be buying generational job security for these communities in Estevan, in Coronach. They have said they are going to replace megawatt for megawatt of coal with nuclear. They said in January, and I think the Estevan Mercury was still around then. You can correct me, but
they were gone by then.
They were gone by then. Okay, so then it would have been Sask today. That Shand is going to be done in 2042, period. I believe that's a direct quote from the Sask Party. This is, I know what we're going to get into, but I'd ask your listeners to reflect on whether or not the government of Saskatchewan is actually rebuilding the coal plants, or if they're just trying to politic with people's lives and people's hopes. Because again, this is a government that's been in power for 18 years. They spent the last 15 years telling the people of Estevan and Coronach that they were going to shut this down. Sorry, here's some coal transition money. But you know, that's the end. In black and white every single year until recently.
Well,
and there is no plan, Brian. There's a press release. I'm sure we'll talk about this lots more over the intervening years, but no, we're not going to be rebuilding the coal assets to run them for 10 years, and neither is the Sask Party.
So there's a few things you alluded to there. I did check with the minister. He did say that as nuclear comes online, it will be replaced megawatt for coal. You know, an open question is that if all these predictions of needing demand to double come true, you know, we might have to keep both of them at that time. But you're right, he did say that. I got a few other things here, but I did want to ask you, let Bronwyn go on here first.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Well, I guess I would just say, Aleana, with all respect, I mean, it is an objective fact that the government has invested in all sources of energy, including wind, including solar, and that Sask power, and of course natural gas. And the only reason that they couldn't invest in coal was because, or further coal or extending coal was because of, you know, first the federal mandate coming out of the Paris Accord, of Prime Minister Harper's, and then a much more sped up timeline under Prime Minister Trudeau. So as long as that, you know, was in place and hamstringing things, of course, it was hamstringing things. And really on paper, as you'll know, with the clean electricity regulations, which are federal and remain on the books, even natural gas wasn't allowed because, you know, of its fossil fuel status, without putting CCUS on it, so carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which is totally, wholly, and completely untested and would be wildly expensive. So long story short, I mean, obviously the decision was reached to say, no, I mean, we're going to, and again, I'm not speaking for the government here, just objective observer in this case, we're going to run the life of coal, you know, federal mandates be damned. And of course, you know, I think everyone is hoping, and I believe you'd agree, that some of these very, very destructive federal mandates, including clean electricity regulations, which, as I say, remain on the books, won't be on the books for much longer, because that was the reason that coal had to be wound down. So to kind of wind it back up, along with potentially more natural gas, comes with strings. Comes with federal strings, and of course we were left in a very difficult position with the Southeast in terms of having to try to navigate that, including with the feds, to help those communities. So I guess just my question would be, where are you at right now in terms of the federal mandates and regulations which remain on the books, which have an impact on all of this, including clean electricity regulations being the main one, which really say no fossil fuel generated power by 2035?
Yeah, our position on the clean electricity regulations has been consistent from the start. These aren't on for Saskatchewan. They still aren't on for Saskatchewan. It is impossible for us to fulfill them, even if it made sense for for our province, and that hasn't changed. But Bron, when I heard you say something about running coal to end of life, and that being the government of Saskatchewan's plan, and that still seems to be the plan. Because, Brian, you mentioned Unit 4, I think, came off line originally in 2021. Unit 5 was supposed to come off, was it January of this year or last year? Unit 6 is still going. Unit 3 is going. Shan's 2042. Poplar River, we're looking into the early 2030s if they're allowed to run for the full 50 years. The government of Saskatchewan is not currently rebuilding those units to run them again for 50 years. They may extend the life, by Minister Harrison's own interview, for maybe 5-10 years, depending on which unit we're talking about, as they transition to SMRs. But I guess my question, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions, but I'm going to.
Sorry, I keep putting it into my mute button, so you're not hearing me drink my coffee. I do have to point out here, and Bronwyn was absolutely a player in this, because Bronwyn, as Minister of Justice, introduced the Saskatchewan First Act, and I want to talk about that from both your perspectives here. Bronwyn introduced it. It specifically had 3 points, and one of those points was asserting that we have jurisdiction over power generation. And Aleana, you voted for it because it passed unanimously.
Sure thing.
You were both players in this here. I want to get into that from both of you here. But one thing I want to assert is that, from my perspective in a cheap seats, this is the biggest energy decision that the Saskatchewan government has made in 10 years, and probably will for the next few years until they do a go, no go on nuclear. Am I correct on that?
Have they decided not? They've decided to go on nuclear.
Well, I mean, they will always crib it as. And actually, I was told that they can't say they will go ahead until the final decision's made.
Licensing regulatory. Okay.
Yeah. So theoretically, we might go ahead with nuclear. Yeah, we're going with nuclear, but until the dollars have been signed, the regulatory is done, we're not seriously going with it until we are. But is this the biggest decision made on energy? And it's absolutely, as you brought up, Aleana, it is a big reversal from we were leading up to, winding these things down. I know the money wasn't being invested both at the coal mines and at the power plants, because everyone expected in 4 years, 4 months, and 20 days, it would be gone. Mm-hmm. So am I correct in this? This is a huge decision?
And this is the question I want to ask, Brian, because I think this is fundamental to this discussion, right? Like, I don't think it's a debate about whether or not by 2028 we're going to have anything new built in Saskatchewan to replace 1,600 megawatts of coal. Like, of course not. Even if we were on the market procuring that project today, it wouldn't be done by 2028. Like, we know that. As I've said, we're not stupid.
Aspen will be online though.
But here's the question that I want to ask to the crux of this. These coal regulations have been on the books for 15 years. We've known, I'm sure we've all read through, years of annual reports, seen the open houses happening in Estevan and Coronach put on by Sask Power. We've seen the decommissioning fund that Sask Power has carried over year to year. And this is the question that I want to put maybe to Bronwyn, is in the last 5 months, what's changed? Because last year we had the same clean electricity regulations, we had the same constitution, we had the same federal equivalency agreements that your government signed for the coal fleet. And suddenly, in the past 4 months, we've seen a complete reversal of what the government of Saskatchewan, what the Sask Party's position was. And I'm as perplexed as probably any of your viewers, Brian. Like, was it Dustin Duncan who was holding the government back from making this decision? Like, was it Bronwyn Eyre who didn't want to go on coal? What has suddenly flipped that the government of Saskatchewan has decided, after 15 years of leaving people in Estevan and Coronach holding the bag, that they're going to start peddling this narrative?
Well, if I may, I guess I'll respond. I'm not responding on behalf of the government. I'm responding as, someone obviously who had a role in all of this, but it was now sort of an observer of things, as others are. But I guess a number of things come to mind. I mean, with Saskatchewan First, that's longer ago than 4 months. So Saskatchewan First was, a line in the sand, November 2019, I guess, saying that, and I do believe it is significant to assert that within the province's own constitution, that, hey, 92A, provincial rights over power generation and, natural resources means something fundamental to our province, which is what we did. And we started to signal that on these very destructive federal mandates, including clean electricity regulations, which, as I say, mandated no fossil fuel generated power by 2035, we would be taking a stand. And I mean, was it last April 2024, we announced that we would not be following the clean electricity regulations. So that was, again, longer ago than 4 months ago. We also started talking very openly about the possibility of coal, where, of course, it had been a federal mandate before, and in this to not run coal. And I think in the spirit of cooperative federalism, there had been an attempt earlier on to try to work with that. But I think there came to be a realization from a power affordability perspective, if nothing else, that those policies were becoming untenable for the economy of the province, right? And I will say on the clean electricity regulations, you say now that it's always been clear. I mean, you did demur as a party on many of those mandates. I'm just going to say C69 and others, was radio silence. So I don't mean to be, not to get to it. But the main
all right, so
the question
hold on
was
here.
what happened to that point. And I just mean, I think there have been, and I think with coal, ultimately, as I say, a realization that there came to be a fundamental untenability to the economy and power costs in the province. And I guess I would put back, I know, Aleana, you've said, well, and when we announced, when the government rather announced the extension on the life of coal, you said that you didn't think that it would do, or maybe it was Ms. Beck, wouldn't do anything to cut costs. And I guess my question back to you would be, how so? How is lower power not going to cut costs for everyone? Not only homeowners, but businesses.
I'm going to let Aleana respond here in a second here, but I do have to go to commercial briefly, folks. I'm going to want to talk about painting into a corner, because I think that absolutely was the case. And we've got a lot more to go. I do have a comment from Ken Hosty from IBEW as well. So we'll be back in 30 seconds, folks. There's a reason that HG Jack has dominated Saskatchewan's oil patch. That's because that distinctive curved walking beam reduces energy consumption by about 25%. That means 25% less power bills, 25% less carbon tax. That's a big difference. And it's available exclusively from Grime Sales and Service, Batman, Saskatchewan. Okay, so Aleana, I'll give you a chance to respond here, then I want to talk about some paintbrushes.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Let's be clear on clean electricity regulations or C69 or the oil and gas cap. Our position has been clear. It has not changed, that we have not been in support of those. I scrummed immediately after the premier at the Williston Basin Conference on that announcement and was crystal clear, right? And I have the distinct I was going to say privilege, but distinct privilege of having had Danielle Smith, of all people, quote me in her debate with Rachel Notley in the Alberta election campaign, pointing to the position that the Saskatchewan NDP has held on things like C69, the clean electricity regulation. So happy to debate the issues, but I'm not going to debate the facts or our positions on these things.
As an outside observer, I have to say, and having written about this stuff extensively, there isn't a lot of daylight between the Saskatchewan Party and the NDP when it comes to clean electricity regulations, Saskatchewan First Act, which passed unanimously, and I think I don't want to get into the whole, question period debating back and forth on minor things. I honestly, from the outside, I hold no party membership for anyone. I think that it's very much a Saskatchewan stance on that. I want to get into here painting into a corner, because I do think that the Saskatchewan government has. These rules were coming up. Every story, I use the countdown, and I do that for a reason. How many days until we have to hit 2030? We are building the Aspen Power Station right now, which is the third in a series of 370 megawatts units. But if we were to replace our remaining coal fleet, we would have to start construction today, get surveyors out there today on 4 of these units immediately if we were to hit that 2030 deadline. The first one that was built at Swift Current cost $605 million. It was on time, on budget. The second one took about a year longer, and it went online in December of 24. $825 million. It was a 36% increase. Aspen, which is almost entirely, you mentioned this when in committee.
Probably 1.2 billion now, right?
1.7 billion, which is doubling the second unit. More than double, but the significant thing about that is that the part you mentioned in committee is that almost every megawatt that's meant for BHP Jansen. Mm-hmm. That's really not adding to or replacing anything. That's just adding to additional demand. So, we're looking at natural gas has become much more expensive, and we're looking at the fact that we'd have to start right now, and the licensing for nuclear is going to take forever. And the no-go, as Ken Hosey said, is 2029 to start construction in 30. So what would the NDP do to get us, even if we started on the GE small modular reactors, if we started right now, gave the go-ahead in 29, first megawatt won't come out until 2034 at the absolute earliest. What would you do as NDP government to keep the lights on in the interim?
Yeah, look, Brian, I'm not announcing today what our plan is going to be. It's coming out in the fall. I know that's probably not going to be a satisfactory answer in terms of wanting the nitty gritty right here, right now, today. But I don't have it. If I did, I'd be happy to talk about it and have it picked apart, because again, this isn't something that we're going to roll out on the eve of an election campaign. This is something that we're putting out in the fall. And the people of Saskatchewan will know what our plan is before they go to the polls.
So Ken Hosey mentioned this earlier. So he's one of the players involved with this. He wrote, Ken Hosey, Assistant Business Manager for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 267, and third-generation coal worker here, representing coal workers at Saskatchewan Power Corporation as well as Poplar River Mine in Coronach. If your party gets its way and scraps the coal extension plan, what exactly, and I'm looking for specifics here, do you expect the people of Coronach to live on? Because when you shut down the only industry in town, you're not just killing jobs, you're killing the community.
Yeah, and hey, Ken, thanks for joining in, and thanks for the question. You live this and know this far better than I do, right? In terms of the impact that this has had on Coronach and on coal country. You can't keep people there. You can't keep jobs there. You're not going to have people moving in and buying houses with a lack of certainty. And frankly, this is the part about the government's politicking on this, the Sask Party's politicking, that I find the most distasteful, because they're not rebuilding the coal industry for your community. They're not rebuilding the coal industry for Estevan. Maybe they're extending the life of these units for 5 to 10 years, but that is not generational job security. That's not what I saw when I was out in Ontario touring the nuclear fuel supply chain, where they have building plans out until 2050. They have 10 to 15,000 people coming on site at Bruce Power every day, and they have the project plan out till 2050 for their reactor refurbishment. And that's just in the one community.
So you want to tell us what you were doing in Ontario?
Job security. That I'm interested.
Before we get to that, though, Brian, if I may, just on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Bowen.
So are you then saying, Aleana, that you would run coal to 2050? Because you talk about nuclear, but are you talking about running coal beyond?
To 2050? No, nobody's talking about running coal till 2050.
But are you, till when would you run it then? Till when would you run it? As opposed to what you're saying the government is doing, what would you do on coal differently?
We're going to have a plan in the fall that's going to lay out exactly what our plan for power generation is for the future.
Because it seems to me that the announcement, mean, obviously it violates the federal mandate. I mean, we're clear on that, right? I mean, the mandate was, you know, from Harper and then sped up under Trudeau, that coal would be wound down. And that has been signaled that it is being wound back up. I don't think there can be really any question about that, including with potential, you know, federal response, which we haven't really heard yet. So I guess, you know, just to be very clear, I mean, you know, is the NDP and are you in support of that position, which is really an open challenge to the federal mandate that's been signaled here?
Sorry, Bronwyn, in support of what position? Like keeping
Are
the
you
lights
in-
on?
are
Yes.
So you're in favor of you're in favor of running coal, of extending the life on coal in violation of the federal mandate.
Right now, where we sit, I'm in opposition, right? You know as well as I do, the Sask Party's in government. If the NDP forms government, it won't likely be until 2028. Can I change sitting here what the government of Saskatchewan is or isn't going to be doing or isn't going to be investing in? No.
No, but that's not what
I try. But no, we're not going to turn. We're not going to turn the lights off on.
I'm just saying response to Ken's text, right? I mean, I guess
Right.
it's a fair question that for for those impacted communities is the position of the opposition that they are in favor of violating the federal mandate on coal, because that's what has been announced, right? So whether it's 2028, I mean, the position is now, is there an agreement that that was the right thing to do for those communities, because it's an open violation of the federal mandate?
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be down here. I'm still trying to.
I think what Bronwyn's trying to say here is that, you know,
yeah, like,
I think we're all of the agreement that
no, of course not. Do we think the clean
Just
electricity
there's a federal mandate saying you can't do what the government just
right?
did.
The federal mandate that your government followed for 15 years. And
well, but I believe that the NDP was also in favor of following, because it was a mandate. In other words, I think, as I say, going back to this idea that there was a sudden, an ultimate realization of the absolute untenability of it from a power perspective, from a cost perspective, from an affordability perspective. I guess I'm just trying to establish common ground. I mean, I think we can agree that federal mandate is worth violating.
Yeah, I think we can agree that we're not going to turn the lights off on Saskatchewan people. We need all of the power generation assets that we currently have and more. To circle back to my initial point, like I hear what you said, we should have been investing more in all of our assets over the past 20 years. We need significantly more power generation capacity in the province than we have if we want to attract and retain investments. If you know, I'm still sitting here in opposition in 2028, 2029, and the government has built out no future power generation assets for Saskatchewan, and the options they've left Saskatchewan people and communities with are continuing to run coal or having no ability to keep our lights on because we don't have the interprovincial interties, because they haven't built out enough natural gas, because they haven't invested in renewables, because maybe the shine is coming off their SMR plan and they've decided they've painted themselves into a corner. Like, no, our position is going to be pragmatic. It's going to be grounded in the reality of the province. It is not going to be to turn the lights off and, you know, let Saskatchewan people freeze in the dark.
I think
so.
I'm about a few things here.
Yeah, we're not looking to be ideological about this. Do we believe in rebuilding 50-year assets to run them for 10 years? Like, no, that's not a good use of taxpayer money.
I'll just say this one. I think the pragmatic thing is that there really are the few options, right? I mean, there is only, you know, if you're not going to do coal, then it was always natural gas. And the feds were telling us we couldn't even do that. So it's really only coal, natural gas, some renewables into the mix to nuclear. There are no other options. So pragmatic approach would be obviously to use coal in the interim, right?
Yeah, and like Brian and I got into this in our discussion that he published today. Like, we're not looking to shut any power source off, coal or otherwise, and leave this province with no options. And as we've already canvassed, like we're quite happy to stand stand up for this province and to disagree with any federal government in Ottawa, regardless of who's in power. That's consistent with where we've been on these issues.
I want to address something that you said here, Aleana. So in just regards to things that have been built. So Blue Hill here near Herbert was 175 megawatt wind. Assiniboia 200 megawatt wind. Beckevar 200 megawatt wind. Those were all added in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we have went from around 200 megawatts to over 800 megawatts of wind in the last 5 years, which was tripling what we had before.
And expanding natural.
So that has happened. We have built the Moose Jaw and Swift Current gas plants, which were added. And we've also had currently under construction the Sask Power intertie, not to other provinces, as you say, but to the United States of 500 additional megawatts. That's under construction right now for $1 billion. So a number of things you brought up, those things actually have had action taking place on that.
For sure. I'd submit, Brian, that, like as laudable as those are, I'm not going to say like, oh, we shouldn't have built any of those. 800 megawatts of wind. I've got it somewhere on the wall behind me, however many 500 megawatts of solar, whatever we brought online, and 3 natural gas plants.
No, solar is nowhere close to that. We only have 30 so far.
Oh,
but,
God.
But we just
there have been a bunch of 125 megawatt announcements made in the past year. They might not be online, but.
Yeah, no shovels have gone to ground for any of those yet.
Yeah. But I think anyone in industry knows we need significantly more than that, right? Especially when it comes to dispatchable power like renewables. That's not a megawatt for megawatt replacement, right? Those need to be built out.
So I want to get into the nuclear discussion here. Ken posted this here. He said, there was no answer to my question. If the NDP gets its way, how are my people going to feed their families?
Yeah, it's again, some of the sick politicking that this government is doing. What I'm focused on, what I'm hoping we can be talking about in the fall is our future for power generation in the communities where we already have the infrastructure, where we have the workforce. I know I know the pride and I know the realities in these communities of people who, like Ken, said I think you said you're a third generation coal worker in Coronach. I think we need to keep these power generation jobs where the distribution is, where the workers are. It's already devastated Coronach. He'll know better than I will that 50% of the workforce in Coronach commutes in. Keeping jobs in small cities and communities in Saskatchewan that have a history of power generation, that have a skilled labor force, that have people there with their kids in school, owning their homes, I think is the common ground that Bronwyn spoke about, that I want to believe all of us share, regardless of partisanship. Investing in power sources, whether it's nuclear, whether it's natural gas, whether it's renewable, whether it's keeping coal running until there's other options for power generation, I think is what you're going to see me committed to. I don't want anybody to lose their home or be out of their job. That's
we're going to go to an ad here in a second. This is the next topic here because you went on a bit of a fact-finding tour. I definitely want to get into how we're going to get into nuclear here. But first, we got to do our next ad. So excuse me for 1 second, folks. For your well servicing needs in Southeast Saskatchewan and Southwest Manitoba, you need the General. That's General Well Servicing of Cardiff, Saskatchewan. They've got a fleet of double, triple rigs, pressure vessels, and lighting rentals ready to serve you. They can perform rig assist and frac assist operations as well. Call Kevin at 306-482-3244. That's call the General at 306-482-3244. Yes, sir. Okay, so we've got here a comment from Ryan Dion who said, these are examples of the last 6 years. He's referring to the wind stuff I was talking about. He says the Sask Party's been in power since 2007. They did nothing for the first 14 years. Anyone want to comment on that before we get to rocks and reactors?
Well, I guess if is he talking about coal there?
I think he's talking about generation that's not coal. So yeah. I mean, You know,
So, I mean,
how to replace.
obviously, I mean, there were attempts to expand on the natural gas side, and I think going back to the coal issue, I mean, that was the great quandary, and I've touched on that a number of times. I mean, when something is federally mandated, and you attempt to honor that and then realize with time that it absolutely hamstrings you, you have to act. And I guess that would have been, as I say, accumulation of things that we've seen over the last 4 years, and even further than that, back, of course, to the carbon tax challenge, where we started to say, you know, we simply have to stand up for ourselves as a province. Carbon tax against the clean electricity regulations, pro natural gas, no CCUS on natural gas, too costly, and down the line. And I mean, certainly there was an attempt to assist, you know, the people of Coronach and the communities of Coronach financially, you know, through the province. Was there, though, a realization that we had to do more and actually, you know, cut the knot in terms of continuing to honor something which was destroying the Southeast? Absolutely. But I think that it's massive investment. And I mean, I guess I would just say, even on the Sask Power side, and I know, you know, Aleana, that you've said that there hasn't been dollar figure investment on this latest announcement to run coal. I mean, my understanding is that there have been capital expenditures in the, you know, committed to in the 5-year capital spending plans directly as a result of that decision to extend coal assets. So 900 million between now and 29-30, more than 30 million in business capital planning expenditures in 25-26. So I guess, just counter to some of the stuff I've read, including in Brian's piece this morning, where you've said, you know, you don't really see that money on the barrelhead. Just wouldn't mind your response on that, because it is there, right, allocated.
Yeah, I'll maybe jump back to Brian Crossman, my other favorite Brian from the Southeast. Sorry to ruin your cred, Crossman, but you know, respectfully, I don't think building few natural gas plants and a bit of renewables and the CCS project in the past 20 years has been adequate for Saskatchewan. I think we're now having to pay the piper when it comes to our infrastructure and our power generation, and that's why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in. And you know, with respect to Bronwyn, she was inside the government when these decisions were being made or not made. I wasn't. I get my hour or half an hour in committee of questions with officials every year, maybe 15 odd minutes at Crown annual reports, and then I pour through them like every other citizen in the province. But we did not see a formal out-facing change in position on coal from the Sask Party until January. And we still see this talked about as a megawatt for megawatt replacement waiting for nuclear. So what I'd submit to people watching and what I'd submit to the people of the province is that because the government painted themselves into a corner by not making an adequate level of investment in our power generation infrastructure, we have no choice but the status quo until SMRs get online. God willing, they do, because I'm not sure what we're going to do at that point. But
so this is leads into where I really want to get to your rocks.
I want to jump in on the commitment, the financial commitments that the government has made. And I'd submit anyone can go into Sask Power's annual reports, same as me. And Sask Power this year has actually pulled their long-term spending plans from their financial notes. You used to be able to look out and see what's going on, you know, 2 to 5 years. You'd be able to see the PPA, the contractual obligations. If you go out looking long-term, that's no longer reported on. I went back through 10 years of annual reports because it struck me as odd that it's missing. That's gone. Sask Power did. Bronwyn's right, raise their borrowing limit this year. We passed that legislation in the spring to allow the Crown to borrow more money, looking out for the next 5 years. But there is not $900 million committed by this government to a coal refurb. There is nothing that has been formally put in place, publicly recorded, to show any kind of design, engineering, procurement, for this project. And I don't just want to be a downer. Like, I wish I had something that I could come in and say, like, Estevan and Coronach, here's the solution. But there's a lot of challenges that this government is facing on power generation. If they are going to, rebuild, Lloyd's in London doesn't insure coal fleet right now. This is going to be
I do have to.
We're going to get to Brook Director, but I do want to say, Brian, I mean, the cost of natural gas is a factor, right?
Sure.
So if you're going to build natural gas plants, there's always a cost factor to that. So there were natural gas plants built at Chinook and the other one, and there's a cost to that, and a cost analysis done on the long-term hedging or reality of natural gas. And the tie-in, there have to be at least two players for a tie-in. Manitoba had no more hydro to give, so we looked to the tie-in to the south. As I say, natural gas did what we could, and it was an economic decision in terms of the economics of that. The huge elephant in the room here, and it leads right to Rock to Reactor, is of course the announcement we made on SMRs, which was in response to power investment in the province and power generation in the province and how the future of that would look. Is there a realization, and was there a realization that coal had to come online for the economics of that, because natural gas perhaps wasn't as fully there, not only because of the federal mandates, but just because of the economics of natural gas? Yes. And so we went where we could, which is obviously into the nuclear realm, which is what we're getting at. But ultimately, there has been this announcement of coal. And I mean, personally, and I've said this before, I felt that probably one could have gone on coal earlier. Certainly the opposition, with all respect, was not there, and certainly not there in terms of violating the federal mandate. So I think that we all kind of know from a perspective.
We got 10 minutes left here. I want to grab the reins for a second. And
this is like question period, though. This is fun.
Well, I really want to get the NDP perspective on Rock to Reactor, because I remember very clearly, and I've used this in my story, where I actually quoted a CBC thing from 2005 when Peter Preble, who was very much at NDP minister under Calvert, who was very much reflected the environmental side of the NDP, said that he would quit cabinet if we even considered a reactor. And now we have you and Carla Beck standing on the riverbank of in Saskatoon last week, talking about, maybe it's 2 weeks ago, talking about, we want to go from rock to reactor. We want to do the entire process. You just came back from Ontario, did fact-finding things. So I want to hear, full-throated, where the NDP stance is on nuclear. What do you want to do? Do you want to do enrichment? Do you want to do processing here? Do you want big reactors? Where are you going?
Right here, I've got a little nuclear fuel pellet, fun prop that I brought back from Ontario. 20-gram uranium pellet, kind of cute, kind of looks like kibble. But 8 of these can power a household for a year. And they're made with Saskatchewan uranium that's exported to Ontario, where people make real good money, baking it into these ceramic pellets and putting it into the fuel cells and running the plants that make up a huge amount of Ontario's electricity mix. And boy, is it frustrating. Should it be frustrating to everyone in this province how much wealth and opportunity we're exporting out of this province while doing none of the processing and value add here? You talk about 20 years ago, and I'd say, hey, 18 months ago, the government of Saskatchewan was shutting down the coal plants. 20 years ago, I was in high school. Things can change. I'm now a very tired middle-aged lady. Things can change. And I think what you're seeing from us is an acknowledgement and a real embrace and enthusiasm for looking at what we can be doing with Saskatchewan resources, from that rock all the way to the reactor. It's going to be part of this this much teased plan that I'm sure I if you'll have me back, I'd come back to let you jump all over in the fall when it's out. But yeah, nuclear power could be a huge part of what we do in Saskatchewan going forward.
So we're definitely going to get you as a regular on here if you're willing. But are you we were just at the Midwestern Conference there last or at the end of July, and the reality is that nuclear is being talked about in dramatic expansion. Literally, hundreds of reactors are being discussed. Cameco now owns 49% of Westinghouse, which is one of the United States' two primary reactor builders. We've got the Premier of Saskatchewan talking about 1,000-megawatt reactors, or actually 1,200 megawatts.
He sounded so sad doing it, though. Like, I don't want to be mean to the Premier, but he was kind of like, "Oh, we don't really have a choice. I guess we might have to get there." And I was like,
"Well, but the option is,
Premier, like, shouldn't you be excited about this? This shouldn't be inevitable. This should be a great opportunity."
I mean, so as your much teased thing, as you say here, are we looking at, we are going to need more enrichment throughout the Western world.
Yeah.
A lot of enrichment was shut down because of the end of the Cold War and nuclear looked like it was dead. Well, now it's had the resurrection of Jesus Christ and it's coming back, and we're going to need enrichment all over the place.
Don't tell Jan Martel that.
I wasn't there. I wasn't there for the lunch hour. I skipped out.
It was interesting to say the least. But I mean, so there may be treaty stuff and we have to get around with, but do you envision nuclear processing here in Saskatchewan? I mean, that's what you're teasing. Is that where you're getting to?
Yeah, like we need markets for uranium. We need to know that these aren't just projects being announced. Maybe Bronwyn's got it. I can't remember how many hundred reactors, Donald Trump was saying we're going to have online the next 10 years. Like, there needs to be some reality to it. But yeah, we're in the midst of a nuclear renaissance, and Saskatchewan should be at the forefront of that. I've talked about this before. Looking at our power generation future, I believe what Carl and our team believe is there's a real opportunity to build more than we need and to export it. Because Bronwyn's right, Manitoba is not going to be bringing a new dam online in all likelihood in the next 5 years. They're really far along the pathway to electrification. They're going to need more power. Alberta's thirsty. MISO's thirsty. Southwest Power Pool is thirsty. Saskatchewan sits at the heart of Canada. And instead of talking about us being this like little landlocked province and, we just export all of our raw goods, we should be adding value here. We should be generating power. We should be generating prosperity and sharing that across the country, building out this energy and economic security, not just for Saskatchewan. I don't want us to be a net importer of power. We can export. We can sell it to our neighbors, make a couple bucks on the transmission, make a couple bucks selling power, and we can add value into the full supply chain of these industries. And that includes uranium and nuclear. Absolutely.
I'm all for a moratorium on going back to the future or the past repeatedly. And Peter Preble would qualify, with all respect, Brian. But I'm going to do it once. I'm just going to say that I think it's also fair to point out that part of the reason we did not build out big reason why we didn't build out the supply chain was because of the historical position of a former NDP government, right? And you were young, and so I'm not. But I think that's important to kind of remember. And
it is.
I guess I would just say now, and I take your point. I understand this is where you're going, and I heard, Carla Beck too, and the rest. But is it not fair to say, just on a conversational basis here, that you still have politically a bit of a base issue going nuclear as a party? Do you not? I mean, I just find that genuinely interesting, and because there are, even within the caucus as it is right now, I know Athabasca MLA has social media tweeted about anti-nuke stuff in the past, and Erica Ritchie I don't think is a big fan, and so on.
Hey, Erica Ritchie was standing right beside me in that press conference.
I know. I noticed that. I noticed that. And honestly, Aleana, when there were consultations done, 20 years ago going on now about the future of nuclear, by the Sask Party government in the early days, the response was not wildly positive in the province. Nope. And I think that things have changed in the province too. And you referenced young people and how they view nuclear and so on. But do you agree that you have a base issue in your own party about going nuclear?
No, I don't. I do agree. I do agree with, what you painted in terms of history, right? Like that is true. Where I disagree is to say it is only New Democrats who have historically been less comfortable with nuclear. That's frankly not the case. And I mean, we saw that with the Sask Party and some of the early consultations that had happened earlier on in their mandate. I think we have seen a real shift broadly when it comes to views on nuclear. And this is kind of the needle that I've tried to thread. And I say this very earnestly on this file, is nuclear has been, I think it was my first year that the SMR plan came out when I was elected, and it was like, oh my God, we're talking about nuclear again. Like, all of a sudden, where did this come from? And I think it is really important to take the politics out of this issue. That was my message to Minister Morgan. That was my message to Minister Duncan. There are going to be people who have huge issues with any kind of nuclear, right? They're going to see it as part of nuclear proliferation. Maybe they grew up in the shadow of Chernobyl, or Fukushima still looms really large for them. And I think those people need to be respected. We can't just dismiss them. But if you look at where the world has shifted, and I did talk about it in particular with young people, and I'll include us all in that, there is a real belief that nuclear is a low emitting, safe option for stable power. So like on the nuclear file, I'll be so pissed off if suddenly this turns into a partisan back and forth. Like, our party's not there. We're not there. I don't think the province is there, and it would be to the detriment of our potential for industry, for attracting this kind of investment, for, the companies that build the fuel cells, that do this work. They're not going to make those investments in a province that's actively trying to tear itself apart on the subject of nuclear power. So I say this really kind of idealistically, but I really hope there's not a renewed interest on behalf of the Sask Party in politicizing nuclear power, because I think it's to the detriment of all of us. Like, Brian, we saw this at Williston Basin this year. Was it Gokan who stood up and was like, why are there so much politics in energy? Why can't we just talk about the facts? And like, yes, my man, I agree. It's to the detriment of investment. It's to the detriment of our province. And I'm not saying, the left is innocent of this, or the right is, or the center is.
But you see, part of that drives me a bit crazy, right? When I hear comments like that, because it's sort of, why is it political? Well, I mean, look at what we've just been talking about coal. I mean, you say you're going to run coal, that's instantly political because you're running afoul of another level of government, right? As a province, for example. Or you say, you guys have supported clean electricity or have been against clean electricity regulations, instantly political, because again, one is saying to then Minister Wilkinson, we are not going to follow what you are telling us we have to do. Energy is political. And I always think it's easier said than done, this thing about let's depoliticize. I don't really see nuclear as being politicized. I think that if I see anything, and I was going to ask you about this, Aleana, I've sort of gotten a tea leaf sense from you, maybe reading between the lines, that what you are going to come out with, and I'm just putting this out there, would be not maybe so much the SMR model as the large facility model. And I've kind of seen a similar hint from the government that maybe that's where we're going. And Brian, this is from material you've written about and alluded to, and Aleana, some of your quotes. Is that fair to say? Do you sort of see it as open question on the SMRs in light of the cost?
Yeah, I think we'll have to stay tuned for the fall plan, no matter how many times you guys get me to try and get me to scoop myself. But yeah, like on the SMR front, I think my message as a Sask Power critic that I've carried forward on behalf of my leader and my crew is that, like, look, we've got questions about this government's ability to manage projects of any scale, to keep them on track or on budget, and that this conversation should be one with like public transparency and accountability. Why did they choose the model that they chose? I don't know. Like there might be great reasons for why they proceeded with it, but we don't have any information. And when we're talking about potentially doubling the province's debt load, I see some questions in the chat about, you know, who pays for these things and who's on the hook. An SMR is what, coming in at $7 billion right now, Brian, and change.
All right, so I've been like, I just going to jump in here because I know you turn into a pumpkin here pretty soon, so we're probably going to wrap it up unless you had some more time. But I think if we can get you on next time, I think what we really need to talk about is the cost thing, because when Don Morgan first announced this 3 years ago that we'd build potentially up to 4 small modular reactors, at the time, the Ontario Power Generation Minister, who was here in Regina, said, well, they could be $2 to $3 billion each. And Morgan said, yeah, but they could be 4 to 5. And the Ontario guy said, well, we don't think it's going to be that high. And Morgan said, yeah, but they could be 4 to 5. Well, Ontario just sanctioned 4 of these reactors a couple months ago, and the price tag was $20.9 billion. And the budget that was passed by the Saskatchewan government at right around the same time was $21 billion, basically dollar for dollar. And how we're going to be able to afford that, I don't know. But if we're running short on time here, I don't know if you have time to answer that or not, or we should save that for the next time we get on here, Aleana.
No, it's probably like 3 more podcasts, but I think it's maybe a good place to end in terms of what I think. I hope any decisions about power generation are focused on, and it is that affordability piece for the province, but also for the ratepayer, right? Industry needs the predictability of knowing where they're going to make or keep their investments. And part of that is having, affordable, reliable, and for many of them also a measure of sustainable power. But they're concerned about that affordability. And, Bronwyn will know as well as I will, having like knock doors, it's cost of living is the driving factor for most people, and making decisions that are in the best interest of all classes of customers for Sask Power, as well as our provincial debt load. Like, God, what a challenge we all have facing us as a province as we move forward.
Well, and everyone's been excited about Westinghouse being bought by Cameco, 49% bought by Cameco. But the reason why is they went bankrupt on the Vogtle 3 and 4 project, and they were bought out of bankruptcy on pennies on the dollar. And, this is one of the big things we'll want to explore in the future. Bronwyn, any last comments here before we wrap up?
No, I guess going back to this issue about the politics of energy and so on, I think another reason that there was kind of let's call it a zeitgeist change was the election of Carney, right? And you were questioning earlier, Aleana, just about, what all changed. And I think there was a genuine hope that maybe with this new man in town, things would become somewhat less political and even more benign in terms of the provinces. And so leave us be and let us make these power generation ideas or these power generation policies, which we really have with constitutionally the right to do. All these things remaining on the books are a worry, that remain with him. But I think that was also part of the new chapter hope that we saw even with the announcement around coal from the province. So I don't know. It's I guess I would say that when Carney was running, one of the things that a lot of people said was that he had to turn into a conservative to win. And my honest assessment is that the opposition has also trying to turn into more conservative side approach, political when it comes to some of these issues. But that's just a political observation. But no, I think it's very important, very helpful and good discussion. And it's nice to have a bit of time to flesh some of these things out. And I mean that in all good spirit.
Thank you.
Aleana, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I'll, of course, there's politics and energy, but partisanship, maybe I'll just add a couple comments. But no, thanks to both. And thanks, Bronwyn, for that. But it's a New Democrat whose name is on the Boundary Dam units. Kim Thorson, I know him. He's the last surviving member of the Douglas government. Somewhere up there on my bookshelf is Tommy Douglas turning on the first pipeline in the province. Alan Blakeney believed deeply in the potential for uranium and for what that entire industry from rock to reactor could mean for Saskatchewan. There's going to be politics in this, but if we want to make good decisions for the people of the province, and that's what I'm committed to. That's my fun power generation plan in the fall. What Carla and our team are going to be putting out is getting away from some of that ideology and making decisions that are grounded in reality, common sense, and affordability for people in this province who do not feel better off than they did, say, 10 years ago.
Well, folks, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much. Really appreciate having you on, Aleana and Bronwyn, both of you. And it'd be nice to maybe get you on as a regular every few months or whatever, because one of the things about Pipeline Online is that my thought is that energy is the biggest story right now in our society. That's why it's political, because if no one gave a damn, it wouldn't be the biggest story.
Hear, hear.
We don't have anyone lined up just yet. Next 2 weeks from now, we're probably going to be doing it possibly on Tuesday, I think Bronwyn mentioned. So we'll get someone lined up here. I'm talking to a few people already. We had 124 people watching live, so I really appreciate it, all the comments. And see you next time. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks again.